Power 102 Digital Thursday. Well, yesterday was a public holiday. We celebrated Labor Day, or we observed the occasion of Labor Day. And of course, Faeed Ali normally hosts our Wednesday program. Today he's on with me on Hard Talk, Power 102 Digital Thursday. And we have the topic today deals with the 1970 revolution and the Black Power movement, its meaning and significance to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the region. We have a very special guest on with Faeed. Good afternoon, Faeed. I'll leave it to introduce your guest.
Good afternoon, David. It's good to hear your voice. It's good to be back with the general public discussing something of significance once again. Today, we have no other than one Mbayo Mohini. I hope I got that pronunciation correct, Mr. Mohini. Perhaps you can just by putting on your camera and so we can see you. But it's good to have you, Mr. Mohini.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Mohini. Great. It's good to put a face to the name. I'm seeing you loud and clear now.
Very good.
Thank you so much for making yourself available. Let me introduce you to our listening public. Today on Hard Talk, we have Mbayo Mohini. He is a serving member and currently servant president of the National Joint Action Committee and servant chairman of the National Action Cultural Committee. He is a distinguished son of the soil, if I may put it so in my words. Mr. Mohini gained his socio-political consciousness during the mass movement in 1970 when he participated in demonstrations led by the National Joint Action Committee in Tobago. Mr. Mohini, your CV speaks for itself. You served as a senator and minister in the People's Partnership Government from 2010 to 2015 in the Ministry of Arts and Multiculturalism. Then in the Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration 2012 to 2013, and the Ministry of National Security 2013 to 2015. In terms of and to those of our listeners out there, Mr. Mohini represented the people of Trinidad and Tobago at conferences in Kenya, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, Nairobi in 2010, Colombia, Organization of American States, Medellin 2011, Samoa Commonwealth Parliamentary Seminar, FIA May 2012, and the list goes on. I want to welcome you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our program. I was having a conversation with a senior colleague in the field, and he was saying to me that if I want to talk about what transpired in 1970 and some of the developments arising out of that, you would have actually lived through that process. So we have somebody who, it's not, we're not getting an academic reflection of things, we're getting somebody on the ground who was actually there. So we have to take full cognizance of the role that you play. But tell us something, maybe we could start with this. What would have created within your mind's eye and within your consciousness the need to embrace the mass movement in 1970? One, and maybe you can incorporate in your response, what is the significance of changing one's name to something away from the Christian name and embracing another name?
Well, my entry into the mass movement was an unusual one. I can remember the 26th of February when there was the first demonstration, 2 days after that first march, where the focus was on the Canadian presence in Trinidad and Tobago, the Royal Bank, the Scotia, what have you, the Canadian Embassy, because at that time, a number of students from the Caribbean, I think approximately 38 to 39 students from the Caribbean, as well as about 12 from Trinidad and Tobago on trial in Canada for what they term destroying the computer center, which there are a lot of doubts as to what the truth of that accusation. Actually, the students almost died in the fire. So it is strange to believe that someone is going to set a fire to burn themselves alive. As a matter of fact, the students reported, somehow they were lucky, they were fortunate to find an axe in the room, and so they were able to smash themselves their way out the back door. But notwithstanding that, they were accused of destroying the computer center, and they were on trial. So that the student guild at the University of the West Indies picked up the issue, and the chief servant, Markandel Dagger, and Kaffa Kambon went up to Canada to deal with the issue. They told them in no uncertain terms that they were demanding justice for their own citizens, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And the chief servant took it a bit further when he told them that whatever they meted out unjustly to the Caribbean students would be met by a similar response as far as the Canadian citizens in the Caribbean was concerned. And we came back to Trinidad after that. So that there was that issue on the table. And then, as I said, on the 26th of February, that march was an international day of solidarity with the students who were on trial. So that was the issue, right? That they were focusing on the 26th of February 1970. NJAC was actually formed on the 26th of February 1969, 1 year prior to that. And during that time, they would have taken up a number of issues, both in Trinidad as well as in other parts of the Caribbean, the banning of the name is not coming to me right now, but they took up issues in other parts of the Caribbean, as well as they participated in the bus strike, issues involving workers in enterprise, etc. That type of situation. But I only really became aware of the movement on the 28th of February, which was actually my birthday, 2 days after the first demonstration of 1970. And when I looked at it and I looked at the kind of persons I saw involved there, just their vibration, I said that locking up these men, because they arrested them the morning of the 27th. The march was on the 26th, and on the morning of the 27th, they swooped down and they arrested 10 of the student leaders, because remember, this was coming out of the University of the West Indies. They arrested 10 of them. And when I saw the personalities involved, just their, not knowing them, but their vibration, I said, they're not going to stop this by arresting these gentlemen. And that was it with me. And I did not really pay much attention until they came to Tobago about a month after.
So, tell us something. The NJAC, you said, was formed in February of '69. Right?
Yes.
What was the platform for NJAC's creation, and what did it sustain itself on thereafter? Because everyone associates NJAC with 1970, not '69.
Good. Well, if I could go a little further back, right? We may have to thank the first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, because the chief servant never intended on getting involved in politics. He was very community-oriented. He worked in the Ministry of Social Welfare as a welfare officer, going out to the community, but he never really intended to get involved in politics. However, I must mention that on the 30th, the NACC will be observing its 50th anniversary. And it is out of one of the NACC's, one of the things that we achieved is related to his getting involved. Because on the 31st of August, 1962, people were going out celebrating how we are independent now. So he went out as well, he and some friends, and they went into a party. And in the party, he was observing that they were only playing foreign music. So he went up to the DJ and told him, listen, this is our independence. Now is the time when we have to support our farmers, our industrialists, our music, our culture, etc. And he asked him to put on a calypso, which he did do. He put on a Sparrow. At that time, Sparrow was the calypso king of the world. And when he put on the Sparrow calypso, the audience bawled it down. They said, no, 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 we don't want that. This ain't carnival. Showing you that at that point in time, calypso was chained to 2 months of the year, January and February. And NACC, of which I'm now the chairman, was able to break those chains through the Black traditions in art. And some of the artists who performed in that program will be honored by the NACC next week, Sunday the 30th, 4:30 p.m. at the Queen's Hall. So how did that get him involved? He and his friends left the party at that point in time, and he began to expound to them what independence means, what an independent country should be, the enlightenment of the population, the unity between them. And one of his friends said, but if that is how you're thinking, you understand this to that depth, why not do something about it? So he asked, who will follow me? And the gentleman by the name of Johnson said, I will follow you. And they sat down and overnight wrote the Constitution for Pegasus. And that was prior to their being entered, because that was 1962. Okay, so that is really the genesis. That was the starting point. The second point, as I said, he was, we could give some tribute to Williams here, because Pegasus was becoming a very powerful organization, even though the chief servant had no intention of getting involved in politics. As a matter of fact, he was trying to get into Howard University to study philosophy. But so be it. Every idea he came with, and he took to the government, not for assistance, because in all those instances, everything was organized. For example, the stadium they were going to build at Constantine Park in Macoya, the land was donated for the initiative. The funding was procured, or at least it was realized, it was there. And they just went to the Prime Minister, out of a mark of respect. And lo and behold, he went and announced that the government was going to be building a national stadium at King George V Park. Well, those of us from that era would all know that that project never came to fruition. It did not reach much further than the foundation. So when on 3 occasions he attempted to, apprise the government, look, we're going to be doing this, we'll be doing that, we'll do the other. Eventually, one of his products was sabotaged, and that was when he was launching Project Independence, which was a project to go to the communities, speak to the people, let them understand what independence is all about, so that they could work with purpose, with understanding, with appreciation, and with that sense of unity for the building of a strong, independent nation. I should mention by then, Pegasus already had their independence concerts running each year for 6 days straight, where because of that concept of national unity, you'd have the Indian population, the Syrian, the African, the Chinese, the First People. He sought to bring together all the ethnic groups, right? With the artists performing free of charge and the audience coming in free of charge and running that concert for 6 consecutive nights, each independence. So that as we realize the trend there, right, launching Pegasus, and then moving forward with community service, not being interested in politics. But when eventually he was allowed to launch that project, the then Prime Minister called a mass meeting in Woodford Square, right next to City Hall, where he would have launched. And he had to cancel his program. And at that point, he said he's not going to take it anymore. He just began to let Pegasus die a natural death. And he began to set, because Pegasus was non-partisan, you had the DLP at that time, it was not UNC. You had the PNM, you had all the parties there, in workers and farmers. Anyone could have joined. Politics was not the intention. Together, about 75 of the best, brilliant young minds, including people like Geoff Seward, became head of the Defense Force. So Larry Constantine, great Western batsman. Winston Dukaran, Bernard, who became the first Chief Justice. You had the Ken Gordon, who became head of the. You had you was pulling together. These people had not achieved yet. Carlos Dillon became general manager at Mount Irving and Tobago. But years after, they were in their youth, but they were young, they were brilliant, they were purposeful. And this is the team that he pulled together. And because they were competent and they were strong. And I don't know, maybe that got the Prime Minister a bit concerned. And hence, he did what the chief servant said. He overstepped his bounds when he tried to sabotage that launch. So he did actually achieve in having it cancelled. So that is the genesis of the actual chief servant's involvement. Obviously, when he went on to, as he no longer decided to continue his pursuit of philosophy, and he decided to stay at UWI, and where he would intermingle with some of the young, brilliant minds, and there he met people like Kafa Kambon, Ayugo Ome, Brinsley Summer, who was a young lecturer who just began to lecture there. And they began to build a process for the transformation of the society. Being launched at a space that is now called Dagger Hall at the University of the West Indies.
Would it be correct of me to say, or to infer from what you just said, that NJAC assumed a political arm and stood under the umbrella of NJAC, born out of the experience with Pegasus?
Largely so, but not absolutely, because the chief servant would have entered UWI possibly about 1967. He lost a year when there was an assassination attempt on his life. The car that his girlfriend used to drive, the breakthrough line was tampered with, and he got in an accident to the point where the doctor, when they took them to the hospital, the doctor pronounced him dead. And it's a nurse who saved his life. When she looked, he said, "Doctor, this man doesn't look as if he's dead." But he was in a coma, so he could not respond, And when the doctor examined him again, he said, "My God, he's alive. Watch him to the wall." So he lost a year because he was unconscious for almost a year. And that would have been possibly 67, going to 68, 69. He re-entered. He became the president of the Student Guild. And NJAC was formed there sometime after.
Just for the sake of clarity, you said Dagger spent a year in a coma in 69?
No, on crutches.
On crutches, okay.
Because both hips were broken, but he was in a coma for possibly about a week or so.
All right.
But the doctors realized that he was still alive.
Tell us something. What does you said that he was having meetings and carrying discussions and wished to continue along that line of teaching the people what true independence means. Could you explain to a listening public, philosophically and tangibly, what does independence? What was it that independence meant in that context, in that time?
Okay, there were particular concepts, and strong and foremost in it would have been unity, because we always hear a house divided against itself, likewise a nation divided against itself is not going to stand. So one of his focal points was national unity, and this is why he would have hosted those types of concerts, trying to have the various ethnic groups of the nation reflected in those concerts. But he also believed that to build a strong nation, you need an enlightened population. And that is what Project Independence would have been, where they go out in the communities, meet with the members of the community, speak with them, give them some guidance into what will make the nation stronger and better. Continue that emphasis on unity, and generally getting the population to recognize that they need to work in unity, in purpose, in enlightenment, and in determination.
When you examine the socio the social political context in that time. You're speaking unity. We are still hearing that dialogue of unity today. We've seen that there seems to be, on some level, politically, that is, politically, some division, meaning that we have essentially two parties that represent um, an ethno interest that seems to be at loggerheads with each other, if I may put it roughly in a sketch like that. Is it safe for me to say that the editorial surrounding the talks of unity hasn't changed in between 1970 and now?
You see, there are two types of unity we could look at here, and there are two types of division. There's the divisiveness among the population, right? And then there's divisiveness among the leadership, right? And to me, well, they are both intertwined, right? They both influence each other. And more so, I think that the greater responsibility would come from the leadership. And the point being as well that we are not going to really see progress in this country without unity. As a matter of fact, that is why the NJAC sought national unity in 1970. And were quite successful in bringing the African and the Indian population together. As a matter of fact, from the very inception, the banners would read Indians and Africans unite. And notwithstanding the divisions that were being sown between the two ethnic groups, the chief servant led a demonstration down to Caroni, which was called the March to Caroni, in the Chaguanas, and he was told there that they shouldn't stop there. If they want to get to the heartland of the Indian population, they would have to go down to Cuba. So the march ended up being quite a bit more than it originally was guided to be. But it was worth the effort because the demonstration was supported massively, right? In total, you had approximately 40,000 persons taking part from the beginning to the end, some dropping off, some joining, but in all you'd have had approximately 40,000. And that demonstration would have reached the Cuba car park, where there was a massive meeting. And something that I wanted to speak about as well, and that is the People's Parliament. So there was a parliament there that night, and one of the resolutions passed was that the sugar industry must be taken out of the hands of Tate and Lyle, a British family, two families from England, and come under national control. And that resolution was enforced within a 5-year period, which gave birth to Caroni Trinidad Limited and the sugar industry being localized, or nationalized, I should say. But no longer is it in existence as it would have been then. But in 1975, Caroni Trinidad Limited was born.
Can I good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Your faithful servant. This is David McIntyre here. You know, as at the time in the 70s or in that era, I was attending secondary school. I was very conscious about the movement and where it was heading. As a matter of fact, I was studying history, and that too promoted and inspired me to be interested in what was happening. So, you know, a bunch of us behaved with a militant sort of attitude where that is concerned. That era, there was a deep sense and awareness of Africanism or the Black Power movement. People were highly conscious about that turnaround or change in mentality of the Black people, I should say, because Indian people are also Black people, if I should put it like that. Now, Geddes Granger, as it was back in the days, then became Makandal Daga. You know, he was able to motivate people and to inspire people for such a change. We had a change in the way our people were employed and all of that at the banks, etc., etc. The question is that, can there be a turnaround, or is there a turnaround? Because when you look at what's happening now, it's like a brainwashing, a sort of a brain massaging, a sort of a hypnosis that have the Afro people or the people who are considered black people, you know, behaving in a kind of way now as though you know, they're afraid of being feeling good in their own skin. Now, Makandal Daga was a great leader. Question is there anyone who can continue the works of Makandal Daga? We saw, to me, governments weakened the ability of NJAC to continue. The demise of Makandal Daga, or Great Geddes Granger, I like to call him Geddes Granger when I'm thinking about this 70s revolution and stuff. But can there be a turnaround, sir? Can we influence and motivate the young people now, black people, to understand what that revolution meant, and how hard and how much work was put into that by the people who you name, like Winston Dabro and Carbon and all these guys? They worked really hard in the trenches to bring about that awareness. To me, it's not there anymore. I stand to be corrected. And I feel that a lot of black people, they don't feel comfortable in their skin. You see them wearing wigs, you see them with all this makeup, and they want to look a kind of way. Is there anyone who will have an authoritative stance like Makandal Daga to continue or to make that turnaround of awareness today?
What I will say is that people are people, right? And human beings are human beings. And there's that capacity within the human personality for change. The capacity is there. Look at 1970. They used to say Trinidadians have a 9 days mentality, right? And yet we were on the streets consecutively for 55 days until they declared the state of emergency and imprisoned the leadership. So, you know, the same way in 1970 people rose up, the same way under Butler they rose up, the same way they rose up even prior to that. Okay, change is going to come. The question is, you know, when you say that that consciousness is no longer there, you know, you make it seem as though the consciousness is a building that if you lift up and you remove it. If you put your kettle, right, on the stove and it gets very hot, and you take it off the stove and you leave it there, and you walk down the road and you come back and say, but the kettle is not hot anymore. Could it ever be hot again? No, it's not going to be hot because there's not sufficient ensuring that heat remains. And it is the same way with our society. People believe as if colonialism is dead because that was our main our main opponent, a colonial society, right? That not only place our people in economic slavery, but also in mental slavery and psychological slavery. So that oftentimes I hear, remove the chains from the hands and remove, you know, the chains from the brain, from the mind. But I'm not hearing anyone talking about the psychological slavery. Because I could remember there's a woman I knew quite well, and she was, you know, she boasts that she's proud to be black. She's a proud African, you know. But when she came face to face with that pride in a psychological way, I heard her arguing with someone that her daughter was not as black as another youngster, another boy. In other words, it is good enough for her to stand up and say, I'm proud to be black. But when she's faced with it, face to face with her daughter, who is a bit darker than her, and someone saying that her daughter is blacker than someone else, I would have been proud. I would have been proud, but no, she felt negatively affected to the point that she had to argue. And basically, in my opinion, the both of them were just very black, possibly the same complexion. But she's trying to find an inch more blackness in the other person. That is the psychological I'm talking about. And when I have done some research. I've traveled a bit, and I have looked at the institutions that are established in some countries, right, to perpetuate that mental slavery. I look at the evolution of society, okay, where, for example, our families have been dismantled. I could remember when I was a youth in secondary school, I used to be seeing advertisements in the papers, having these young girls looking so wonderful, so beautiful, so fantastic, dressed up in these nice office uniforms, and they were advertising the career woman, the career woman, the career woman. And so our women began to leave the homes because as a young man and young boy, we knew about the housewife and the breadwinner. Today, there's no housewife. There are two breadwinners. And our women were manipulated out of the home. Some of them were told that the man controlling, no man shouldn't control you and shouldn't control, right? But in those days, it was not the man controlling. It was both of them controlling, right? It was not, say, they depending on the man as they would tell them. It was man depending on the wife depending on the husband. And both had their role to play. So the homes had stability. A child comes home after school and the mother would say, "Oh, Carlene, how was your day at school? Now, what did teacher tell you? How did you behave today? Let me see your book." And I was a teacher as well. I was in Tobago. And I could remember parents telling me, "From Ohian, I don't know that work that they're doing, but I know the difference between an X and a tick. So if I see plenty tick, I say, okay, the child going good. If I see plenty X, the child has to tell me what went wrong." Today, however, it has changed. When that child enters the home, it's not a mother saying, "Oh, my darling, how are you?" No. It's, "Look, Carlene, you see today, my head hot. I can't take you on." Right? Look, turn on the television. Because you have both the husband and the wife in the concrete jungle, struggling to survive in an economy that is not too kind to them, right? So the love that those childs used to get when they enter the home, because the housewife, she gets up, she cooks, she does whatever, she cleans, she takes a 2 hours in the afternoon, and she gets up and she waits for the children. Sometimes when the children reach home, there's no one there. And yet we expect to have disciplined, productive, achievement-oriented children growing up, right? It is asking a little too much of them. And then many of them are growing up in communities that are totally disjointed, right? With youngsters who saw their grandmothers suffer, saw their mothers suffer, and saying that they are not going to go through the same thing. As the youngsters are saying now, live fast and die young, right? So we must address these social issues if we are going to have better youth, if we are going to have better individuals growing up, if we are going to have persons who will be more focal and who would have the orientation and the inclination and the ability to work towards creating that new society that we spoke about since 1970.
Allow me to ask this. Could you, as an institution, NJAC as an institution, find a covering under the umbrella of the PNM in 1970? Could you not achieve what your goals and objectives were under the covering of the People's National Movement and Eric Williams?
I will say no.
Why do I tell you what no, but my question would be, why did NJAC not find it possible to work with Williams? Is it that you all were at loggerheads in terms of philosophy? Because Williams has coined that there will be no longer Mother Africa and Mother India, that we should all have Mother Trinidad. So it seems that the embracing of Africanism and the embracing of Indian heritage and Indian culture, that is something that he didn't assign value to. In that, if we were to pay attention to that, no more Mother India and Mother Africa, whatever that meant, it seemed that he wanted to create an identity of Indo-Afro-Trinidadians, not people that is cleaving to or that were cleaving to their heritage, but creating a new one, perhaps a synthesis of some kind. So it appears that what NJAC was about was creating more consciousness and one embracing one's past and one's root, and then uniting with other, in this case, the Indo-Trinidadian, and forging an identity along those lines. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Walk us through that. Why wasn't NJAC able to achieve what it wanted under the PN?
It is not for want of trying, because remember that before Makandal Daga, then as your brother said, greatest stranger, before he got involved in NJAC, he got involved in Pegasus. He went to the Prime Minister out of respect, right? He said, look, we have raised funds, we have organized ourselves, we want to build a national stadium, because the chief servant is saying, what does an independent country need? And he said, an independent country needs a space where we could go to Barbados and invite the footballers to come over, the runner athletes to come, or we could go to Norway or wherever and invite these people. So we need a national stadium, and that is how the idea of building a stadium came into being. He took it to the Prime Minister. He said, look, this is the plan. And the Prime Minister said, I need 2 weeks to study it. Went to Parliament the Friday and said the government is building it. So he just he can't compete with the government. So once the Prime Minister announces that project in Pegasus that they were building themselves, preparing for, they had to just drop it. Then they came with a project called Project Port of Spain. They spoke with the business persons, they got the architects involved, engineers, even Peter Minshall, the great masterman with his creativity, joined the team. And they took the idea because they were analyzing that Port of Spain was going to end up as one of those cities that does not have any flair or any strength or any purpose, or any future. And therefore, they took their ideas to the community of Port of Spain, to the businessmen, to the chambers, to what have you, and then they took it to the Prime Minister. And again, well, he endorsed it, yes, but within a month's time, you heard the government announcing that they are going to be doing the same thing. So again, he has to withdraw. Thirdly, they came with the idea to build an art center, because he was always strong about arts. As a matter of fact, when Pegasus was founded, they became it was the first group to honor the Mighty Sparrow, and it would have been Tubaliwaya Bus Butler and Captain Cipriani. They began to honor these people. And every year they started to give out the Pegasus National Awards, right? They ran it for a few years, and I think it's either 68 or 69, somewhere thereabouts, that the government began to do their own national awards, which included things like the Shakonia Gold, the Trinity Course, and he withdrew. So the point about it is that he tried to work with the government. And remember the final straw. Okay, they took this project, they took that project, they took that project. Okay, fine. Pegasus will continue. But when he's going to launch Project Port of Spain, you call a mass meeting right in Woodford Square, right next door to City Hall where it's going to be launched. Drunk them out. They had to cancel their project. He said, no, that is taking it too far. And as Roy Mitchell, who wrote the first document I really read on Pegasus, I will have to get a copy for you, right? Roy Mitchell said after that, he continued with Pegasus, but his mind was really on how he was going to teach Williams a lesson for what he had done. Right?
So it would be safe to say that
out of that, NJAC was born.
Right. So it would be safe to say that Williams may have seen NJAC as a threat.
Pegasus.
Right. He would have seen Pegasus as a threat to his own position, in terms of he wanted to be seen as the father of the nation. Maybe not then as father of the nation, but at least be the center point moving forward. And Jack may have been a little more organized than Williams in that moment. And they were thinking, their thinking was so lateral and so expansionist that Williams decided to take control of the momentum of what Jack was creating and try to put his own, adopt it into his own political philosophy.
Right. No, but he could have seen that this man is interested in building the nation and say, well, okay, let us collaborate and work together, as a team. Because, as I said, the chief servant, he was not interested in politics. As a matter of fact, the only reason he hadn't left the country as yet is because the last of his sisters left home. He and his mother alone, so he had actually gotten into to university in the States to study philosophy, and he cancelled it because he didn't want to leave his mother alone. So otherwise he would not have even been in Trinidad and Tobago. So he ended up entering the University of the West Indies. But the point about it is that here you see a young man willing. They have a group called Pegasus trying to give the country a sense of independence. All you have to do is pull him in, and say, look, let us work together. You have some good ideas, work as a team. And I don't think Ami would have objected, because remember, with each project he is going, look, this is what we have in mind. He's going to the Prime Minister with each project. So I don't think that that is for want of trying that NJAC took a position outside of the political directorate, as was done in that 1970 period. It is simply that, okay, if I can't serve the country, right, as a free agent, then I will do it politically. And then remember as well that he was very, very displeased with Williams sabotaging. That is one thing with the chief servant. He does not believe in that kind of injustice. You don't sabotage someone. You don't put obstacles in their way, as he was experiencing. And at that point in time, he decided, well, look, he's going to take a different approach, right?
Allow me to quote this. I'm taking this quote from a book here I was reading, For Bread and Justice and Freedom, a political biography of George Weeks, written ironically by Kafra Cambon.
Right.
Page 124 of the very same, under the rubric of subversive elements at work, it says, and I'm quoting here briefly, this is relevant to what we're discussing. Weaknesses in Williams' personality were coming into play. And Williams here is Eric Williams. The Prime Minister had a single-minded obsession with personal power and an accompanying tendency to paranoia. A statement he himself made summed up an important aspect of his character. And this is the quote: I can say to any man, come and he cometh, go and he goeth. So it appears from quote and unquote,
yes.
From Cambon's recollection of Williams. Williams had a weakness and a desire, and his weakness was a desire for personal control. So it appears that from the theme, from what you're saying there, there's a spinal connection in terms of how Williams treated with persons who were offering a parallel position to his, or in some way were opposing his approach to how things should be done. Now, clearly, he couldn't stifle what NJAC had to offer in that time in terms of forging an identity of one's own, embracing one's roots. So the Afro-Trinidadian would have embraced where he came from in terms of his heritage. The Indo-Trinidadian would have done the same. But Williams didn't want that. He wanted to put an end, he wanted to uproot that, and wanted to create, he had a different philosophy, politically and socially. NJAC, in fostering what they were fostering in terms of embracing one's roots and forging an identity by uniting with the Indo-Trinidadian and so on, and not just the Indo, but the Chinese, I would imagine, and the Syrian community, creating a synthesis in Trinidad that is essentially one geared towards unity, towards strength, towards achievement. Williams wanted to do that in his own way. Would we be correct in stating that NJAC had no choice but to embark on the path that it did because of the inability of Williams to embrace the chief servants and those around him, and in trying to create a synthesis with him for a better Trinidad.
Whether he had no alternative. Well, to continue to function effectively, I believe it definitely would have been necessary. Okay? Because when he tried to make his contribution, apolitical, not founding any party, not getting involved in politics, when he tried that route, he wasn't making any headway, right? And it's not because he didn't have political ability, because as a matter of fact, Capildio approached him early to have him head the DLP, which was the collateral to the UNC at that point in time. He asked to come and head the DLP, but he told him he wasn't really interested in politics. So that was during the earlier days of Pegasus, the mid-60s, 65, 66. Okay, but he did not want to get involved in politics, and it is only because of his experience, right? Now, he had a choice. He could have just forgotten the whole idea about serving his country, or he could have found an alternative approach, and he chose to find an alternative approach, which is one where he built an independent organization on a political footing, and different from that mindset that he was speaking about, where Williams sought control. The chief servant brought a different kind of philosophy, which we'll have to deal with as we go along. That's the chief servant and NJAC. That's the question of people's participation and people's power.
Allow me to create a parallel. In keeping what you're saying there. What contribution did NJAC make in terms of sitting at a committee stage in making the determination that Emancipation Day should now be African Emancipation Day? What was NJAC's contribution in that change?
Well, the contribution as we saw it in the news, but we had no contribution in that exercise at all.
Right.
You know?
Is it correct of me to say that the Rowley PNM administration treatment of NJAC in some way mirrors the treatment that Williams extended to Dagger back in 70? It didn't change?
Well, we have not had much interface with him, but our concern would have been the question of the reparations committee. That was our major point of concern where this government is concerned, because in 2013, the CARICOM leaders passed a resolution to have the Caribbean establish a reparations commission, and each country within CARICOM set up their own reparations committee, and that committee was set up in Trinidad and Tobago shortly thereafter. But with the arrival of the present administration under the Honorable Prime Minister, that committee was virtually, left in the wilderness to die. And even though we wrote 2 pieces of correspondence to him, we got no response or no positive response in terms of having that committee reinstated as other countries of CARICOM would have their reparations committee, as opposed to the overarching body, which is the reparations commission. But so that basically would be our interface with the present Prime Minister.
So, Mr. Mohini, it will be correct of me to say that NJAC has got no traction with Keith Rowley's PNM on the issues of reparation and the issue of changing the name from Emancipation Day to African Emancipation Day. NJAC got no traction from the People's National Movement. in relation to those issues?
Well, with regard to the reparations, I explained that. With regard to the change of the name, we got it through the media.
It's sad that an organization that was so vibrant as far back as initial the germinal beginnings of a nation, 50 plus years have found themselves being slighted in some way. Forgive my use of the words, you can correct me, but I'm saying being slighted in some way by the very same political entity that really carries an Afro base. What would be your comment on that?
What I would say is that political decision making is usually decision making that is based on certain particular political objectives, whereas such decision making should be made singularly and solely and primarily and what have you in the interest of the population. And the approach should be to the building of a United Nations. And we have suffered from that over several years. Because if there's no national unity, if you are not going to see in what way you could establish a kind of system that is going to tap the energy, the mindset, the resources of the various individuals, institutions, community, you name it, right? You are not going to achieve. If you don't welcome all the ideas into the pot, and then we will see which one is tasting good. As Chairman Mao Zedong has said way back, he said, let 100 flowers blossom. Let 100 schools of thought contend. In other words, bring all the ideas, right? And we sift through the ideas and you make your decision. But we haven't seen that in this part of the world. We have not seen that here, nor most of the colonial or ex-colonial societies that we have. Okay.
Right. Allow me to
it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Allow me to ask this question. You've made it very clear what NJAC's objectives were and what they are. Fundamentally,
no, I haven't done that. I have not done that as yet, but go ahead.
No, we're evolving the discussion. So you've given us some of it. We'll
some
get
of
more
it, yes.
We have time.
Mm.
Are you of the view that the PNM or central government as it stands, under the leadership of Williams, Chambers, Manning, Rowley, that they have done sufficiently to improve and enhance the Afro-Trinidadians socially and economically?
I think that the present state of our people speaks for itself. However, in approaching ethnic questions like African, Indian, Syrian, Chinese, what have you, in approaching ethnic questions, ethnic issues, there are different questions that one has to take into consideration. Some of my views on it are very strong, right? For instance, I don't believe that the Africans or the Indians or any ethnic group should be given any special treatment above any other. But I do believe that that different groups should be given fair treatment. And individuals should be given fair treatment as well. Because we sit in this society sometimes and we criticize individuals who grew up in certain depressed, what they may call depressed areas. It is not just a depressed community, right? It's a community that is going to have a serious impact on the material life, the mental, the educational, the social of persons born in that community. And sometimes we say this one didn't work hard, or that they didn't work hard for this, or they didn't do that. But sometimes you have a youngster growing up in a dilapidated community with dilapidated mindsets, and yet you expect that youth to compete against someone who is growing up in another area, right? And don't come and tell me that their parents work hard, so they shouldn't do it. Why should a child suffer from the delinquency of their parent? Okay, I know there are those who will argue about that. But beyond that, in many instances, those who would have been more advanced would have been those who accumulated wealth over 400 years of chattel slavery and another number of years under indentureship, right? So that there are those who, and this is where reparation comes in as well, because the Jews went through trauma, they were given reparations, right? Other persons in Europe, they got reparations, but when it comes to certain individuals, certain communities, certain races, there are no reparations. And I am saying, if we want to talk about justice, we must give serious, very, very serious consideration, right, to those little children, those babies, those infants who are being born into communities where they have triple, quadruple, and quintuple, even more of a hill to climb than many who did not born and grow up in those areas. And this is something that society glosses over, does not discuss, does not recognize, does not take into consideration. That is that baby who is born there, right, being given fair treatment as he grows from, or she grows from being an infant to a young child, a young adult, etc. Right? And that will be those who survive the gang wars or the bullets that sometimes are flying.
I follow you with that. Now, forgive me for this, but I'm just throwing some stones in the dark, trying to get your views on certain things. So
okay,
don't chastise my
as long as it's not a big stone.
Yes, it's not a big stone.
All right.
In my observation, when Williams would have opened the doors to our Caribbean neighbors, and we would have had transmigration or migrant labor coming from up the Caribbean, that would have been also geared to the fact that our oil industry had taken off as early as the 1920s. So by the 1940s into the 1950s, we needed labor. So a lot of our Caribbean brothers and sisters coming out of the other islands, Grenada, St. Vincent, and more of the Leeward Islands, they would have come here seeking a better life.
Right.
And what we would see is the fluorescence of the Laventil community, the Mova community, and so on. And by the time we got into the 70s, Williams had already begun to put things in place in terms of creating a secondary education through the junior secondary schools. He had also created communities like Maloney, La Hoqueta, Santa Rosa. We would have seen that a lot of those persons who would have occupied the hills of Laventil and the plateaus of Mova, if we may put it that way, they began to accumulate housing outside along the East-West corridor. They would have been not exposed to the shantytown living of the Beetham area. They would have been exposed to different experiences. When we examine those areas now, there are secondary schools in these communities. There are facilities put in place in these communities that other communities don't have. There's a swimming pool in Maloney. There's a swimming pool in La Hoqueta. There is mall space where these communities can have their own malls and encouraging entrepreneurship. We would have seen that we have small business development corporations created through the years, where if you want to get into business and you want to no longer be hewers of wood and drawers of water and so on, that you could, there is space. The Laventil Technology Institute was created where you can go and skills training. We have the youth camps. So is it correct of me to say that Williams and the PNM, Chambers, Manning, Rowley, they have invested in these communities and they've provided opportunity. Yet still, we've seen the fluorescence of gangs, we've seen the fluorescence of criminality. So, and this is the parallel I'm drawing, and I want you to comment on this. The nexus between social empowerment and economic growth and development in terms of an Afro community. The foundation blocks were put there by the PNM. The PNM have done and they've contributed and they continue to do so. The Prime Minister recently said that he put aside some $100 million to be invested in social programs in certain communities in order to lend itself to improvement. The CPEP program, the YTEP programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps, all these social programs, those things won't get towards targeting a particular ethnic variety. It was something that was there for all to embrace, including the Afro-Trinidadian.
Right.
What is your comment in terms of where we are as a society and criminality, and what do you think that the PNM has failed? Do you still carry the belief on some level that the PNM hasn't done enough to improve the Afro-Trinidadian?
I will say they have not done enough. Okay, and you see, you're not just talking about you're focusing on the Afro-Trinidadian. The point about it is, yes, they have laid down these institutions in the communities, and they have placed opportunities that people can access, which some people do access. Okay, I'm not saying that has not happened and that does not continue to happen. But when you look at the state, right, of the communities and the kind of antisocial life and responses within those communities, you know that something has to be wrong. Okay, and
how can the PNM be responsible for that? Those antisocial tendencies you're describing there, the PNM doesn't exist as a body incarnate and walk the streets and live in those communities. You, as a government and as an institution, you lay the foundation and you create the machinery and you create the fertile soil in which good food could grow. I'm not calling them bad fruit. I'm just using a biblical expression when I say that. But I'm saying that if I were to say, and I'm figuratively speaking here because I'm not in any way carrying any agenda. If I were to say that so much has been done and put in place and yet still the antisocial behavior persists, what is responsible for that, Mr. Mohini?
Maybe there's not a connection in the minds of the population between those initiatives and their quality of life. Maybe somehow they don't see, they don't recognize themselves as getting a better life because of those initiatives. Now, not that some persons, again, it is not a fit all, right? There are those who are going to recognize, yes, this could benefit me, this could benefit my family, etc. But what I don't know, what do you think? That all these things that you have outlined are being done, and yet what? The population is just rejecting it? People are just forming gangs just like that? You know? It has to be more than that. There has to be some reason. There has to be some level of disconnect. And that level of disconnect, I believe, exists, right? Where somehow the people are not seeing these institutions as a pathway or a road out of whatever situation or situations they are involved or experiencing at this point in time.
So it would be safe for me to say that until the these communities are taught to take responsibility for their own social climate in terms of, and when I say take responsibility for one's own social climate, I mean until you reclaim your community and you intend to make your community, whether it be Lavantil, whether it be Mova, whether it be Maloney, La Hocketa, Santa Rosa, and Bacadere, Point Fortin, until one takes responsibility for one's community, then antisocial activity is very likely to spiral into disproportionate change. Saying it a different way, social cohesion comes with citizens taking responsibility for themselves and their community. Would it be correct to say that? Social cohesion.
There's a difference between individuals and communities taking responsibility for themselves as opposed to them taking responsibility for the community. And oftentimes, because of the mindset that exists, yes, they would believe that responsibility for their individual welfare, but not necessarily the welfare of the community. Let me just give you one instance. Huh? Back in the 70s and even the 80s, when we used to walk through the communities with our liberation newspaper, I would walk right through Lavantil, right through Beetham, any of these areas, right, without the slightest concern. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't go there now, but now if you are going through these areas, it's in your mind that at any minute, bullets could begin to fly. All right? So the point being that what is responsible for that, first of all? What is responsible for that? Where have those guns come from? How are they getting into the country? Why are those youths picking up guns? Why are they using those guns against themselves and against anyone else? And if you look at the type of crimes that are taking place now, right? The invasion of the homes is something that has gone to a level that we have not experienced before. In other words, it's becoming worse, right? And unless solutions could be found to deal with these issues, I don't know. I don't know where we will be in the next few years. Now, one may say, well, okay, this is the reason, that is the reason, the other is the reason, right? Anyone could postulate. But what I can see is that during 1970, the less than 2 months, the 55 days of demonstrations that we had in 1970, and our approach to building community, building nation, right? When the records were checked at the end of the year, it was found that 1970 had the biggest reduction in the level of crime that this country has ever witnessed, right? A reduction of more than 50%. And that has just been on the road for less than 2 months.
Tell me something, sir. Let me interject you a little bit. There's a socio-economic impact based on the lack of a lot of facilitation and facilitation where infrastructure development is concerned. Okay, the areas that are mostly affected are areas that are really strongholds of the people who are in authority. All right. These people will be crying out for better roads, for better water supplies, for a sort of a access to their own communities, in a sense, where that community development agenda is concerned. Under that, now we have, like Faeed was referring to the CPEP. I will bring in URP. I'll bring in the job offers that security firms and things will offer, the fast food outlets. But these kind of employment, I call it underemployment, because based on the impact on these same people where survival is concerned, and to take their children to these same institutions where salaries are concerned, where they're generating of their personal incomes are concerned, it could hardly match with the cost of living and the cost of having even electricity and these sort of things in their homes. So would you say that it's a socio economic problem that people in these areas are experiencing, even though they are the strongholds of the people who are in power? How do you address the socio-economic impact? Because this kind of salaries that these people work for could hardly maintain them for 2 weeks. You know, so to have your children, you have to make some real hard decisions and make some serious sacrifices if you have to send your child to a school and maintain him or her to go to that school, or even a vocation, be it academic or vocation. They can hardly maintain that. You know, how do we get around to that? I think most of the problems that you hear the young people talking about, well, I too would lean to the fact that there are opportunities that they can grab or grasp and take themselves and their way of living to another level. But if at the same time what they are working for can hardly take them through 2 weeks, and most of the time now, back in the days there were a lot of weekly paid people. Now it's more fortnightly and monthly. How can they manage to send their children to this institution, whether it be academic or vocation or even agriculture? How can they manage that, put food on the table, pay their bills, and enjoy a social life? How can they? Is it the economic impact that is creating all the problems?
Okay, excellent point. It's not the only factor, but it is a very strong factor. The question of their economic survival, right? And a lot of the individuals in those communities are experiencing on a daily basis severe economic trauma. Okay, the situation is really, really bad. As a matter of fact, because we don't just believe in talking, and we established the New Butler Associate College, where it was originally a scholarship school targeting fourth and fifth formers, students who may have written an exam and they didn't get their O-level passes, and you take them in and carry them through. Give them a scholarship from some of these depressed areas. However, well, we started to charge a small stipend because of the financial situation we have been in, or the college has been in since the COVID period. But the point being that it is more than just a question of saying these opportunities are there. There is also that point that you are making there in terms of their ability to survive on a day-to-day basis, the ability to earn the kind of income that would guarantee a decent living. And yet I will give you an example that really hurts my heart. A mother came to me with a young man, her son, and he had passed through the secondary system, and I think he acquired one subject. So I got him into the institute as on a scholarship basis. And she came back to me a few months afterwards and told me that her son said he's not going back to the school. Right? He told her that he does not like to see the stress that she's under to maintain them, right? And he got an offer to sell drugs, and he's going to do that so that they could have a better life. I tried my best for her to bring him to get to talk to him. I was unsuccessful in getting him to come. And that is a reality that he says, look, regardless of what, I am seeing the pressure my mother is going through. She has another child. And regardless of what it takes, I'm going to drop out of school. And I am going to, see how I could assist legally or, in this case, illegally. And once you jump onto that pathway, there's no telling where he's going to be in next year or two, and how long he's even going to be alive. So what you are saying is quite correct. And that mother now, she begins to develop a different kind of orientation. She lost her son. She's not going to lose the daughter. All right. So she has come to terms with him as being already down a pathway that she believes is going to lead to nowhere good. And she's just holding on to the daughter. And that is a choice that one mother was faced with. I was prepared to try and see how I could help. I begged her to try to get him to come, but he was not interested in any event. And I think that she didn't put as much effort into it because she said, look, he going on a bad pathway. Let me try and save my daughter.
Allow me to
that is the reality of life in a lot of these communities. That is just one that I encountered. That is the reality of life in those areas. So where institution or no institution, swimming pool or no swimming pool, right? That is another one who we cannot vouch for at this point in time.
Allow me to support your point, right? I know I may have saw a little PNM, a little pro PNM earlier. So let me pull it back by saying this. And I am apolitical. I'm saying that on air.
Fine.
My position is this. When it is we examine what was created in Maloney, Santa Rosa, La Hoquita, a lot of these, and it would happen in Bacadie in South too, and a lot of the developments that the PNM created, housing, these persons who would have benefited at Shafford Court in Port of Spain, in the Harp,
right.
all the communities that we mentioned there, and there are others, but we're just using those by example. They don't possess a deed where they could go to the bank and say, this is the deed for my property. I would like to surrender this deed in a manner of speaking and use it as a collateral for a loan. And hence I could now get a loan, acquire a loan, and I may have an idea for a business, start a business, whether it's a plumbing company, sole tradership, partnership, limited liability company. In other words, economic power has not been translated into the hands of a lot of persons who would have supported the PNM on the ground, and who would have communities who would have supported the PNM on the ground. In other words, that the Laventil base, how many people in Laventil could actually say they have a deed for the house that they live in and their property that they occupy, that they could now go to all the different financial institutions and say, using this as collateral, I want to get a loan. So it seems that what the Indo-Trinidadian would have had, and what the Syrian community would have had, and the Chinese community, and the various other elements, they would have had the benefit of land ownership. And land ownership creates a different kind of empowerment. It gives you the opportunity to create for yourself and a wellspring to generate your own income, create your own business, and build your own dynasty for yourself and your children and your children's children.
Right.
The dynasty that the PNM seem to have created in creating these communities as a dynasty of dependency, is a dynasty of where I'm always looking to get the government to cut the lawn, the government to clean the drain, the government to actually sustain the building structure. So when you walk through East Port of Spain and you walk up Nelson Street and you come across Prince and you come down Duncan and you walk through East Port of Spain and say, well, it's gang life and criminality. These persons, these individuals, these communities wasn't given an opportunity to become economically self-sufficient or to develop outside of the stronghold of central government or or live outside the remit of handouts. Do you disagree with me, or do you see that there's some sense in what I'm saying?
No, what you are saying is quite correct, and this is why it was in my mind to raise the point that development in a community is more than the buildings, more than the projects, more than the schools. There's something also called the mindset, and the mindset that our people have been cultivated within is a mindset of dependency, a mindset of handouts, a mindset of begging for favors, and not a mindset of creating. As a matter of fact, I would have spent most of my early life in Tobago. And at that time, Tobago was largely, our people there were largely independent in the sense that they depended on their agriculture, they planted their land, they made their farine, they made their tulum, they made what have you little products from the land, they made their cassava bread, and we caught our fish. I remember the jacksman coming around with his horn. So there was that sense of independence, which is a lot better than growing up in a community where you are depending on a handout. As a matter of fact, Tobago used to export up to 1 million pounds of pigeon peas in 1 year, right? Over 300,000 pounds of cassava, right? So the economy had some kind of base. Today, that agriculture is gone. It's nowhere there. And just to say that what we need to do is to develop a new mindset, because you could, as I say, you could take the donkey to the river, but you can't make it drink. You could do the same thing with the people, and they would not respond unless you cultivate in their mind from young that sense of independence, that sense of their own capacity to do and to be. Okay, we'd find ourselves in a situation where our communities remain communities at risk. And in saying that, I must say as well that the crime rate in Tobago has gone to proportions beyond which we from Tobago are definitely alarmed and unexpected. But if I could to add substance to it, because in 2010, when we did our 50th anniversary of the founding of NJAC, we went to one of the sites where the first demonstration in the build-up of that mass movement would have gone, and that was to the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, the Catholic Church, because on the 26th of February, that is where the demonstration actually ended. And we hosted that anniversary at the cathedral, and Archbishop Jason Gordon was there, and he spoke, right? And he said that the revolution of 1970 is not yet complete, because he was still seeing too much dispossession and too much delinquency and poverty in certain areas in this country, right? Which is something that I agree with, that the work that we did in the 70s has to be continued, not just because of what we see in those dilapidated areas, but because we have not yet crossed that threshold of building a strong and united nation. If I could just go a little further along the pathway of the question of that march to Cowan, that and Couva, that initiative of bringing racial harmony between the two largest ethnic groups in the country. We are sometimes not as aware as we should be of what the 60s had, right? Where there was that rivalry, that acrimony, that enmity between the Indians and the Africans, on largely so on political lines, but going beyond politics. And in the elections of 1961, the tension and the conflict rose to such heights that the then PNM government, or the government at that time, declared a state of emergency 3 weeks before the elections. Right? This is something that people are unaware of, some persons. But in the run up to that 61 election, the racial tensions became so high. Right? Capilio was the leader of the opposition. Dr. Eric Williams was the prime minister. And there was that racial bubble that was just building. And it reached a point where a state of emergency was declared. And during the 60s, that 60, 61, 62 period of racial tension defined the relationship between the Indians and the Africans during the decade of the 70s. Right. And this is why in 1970, NJAC decided, regardless of what, measures had to be taken to bring those two ethnic groups, right, to an understanding and a recognition that if we are to have a better Trinidad and Tobago, there must be unity. And I want to give one example of that master, Hoover, because as I said originally, the demonstration was to end at Caroni. As a matter of fact, initially, the plan was to go into the sugarcane fields and spend a day of solidarity with the Indian workers, helping them cut canes, load cars, whatever. But then that did not work because the powers that be said that we come in to create problems in the sugar field. So that was cancelled. Good. But the demonstration now went 26 miles down to Hoover. It went late into the night, and thousands of demonstrators could not get transport back to northern Trinidad. And the elders who were there, some of the elders got together between themselves and came to Macandal Dagger and Geddes Grange and said, we are going to take them. And that we was not the few elders who were there. It was the community that opened their doors to absolute strangers who could take 5, who could take 6, who could take more, who could take less. Right? Gave them something to eat, kept them overnight, and assisted them to get transport the following morning. There was that unity that was building, that principle that was which was one of NJAC's strong principles: unite the nation, right? And I don't know if I should go any further on that.
No.
Let me come in here a little bit. I took part in that march. I mean, that march brought people from as far as Point Fountain to join that march. All right, I followed that march all the way to Caroni as a little fella. You know. I was that militant, and there was this desire for Trinbagonians to own Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the leadership that we are having now, I was listening to a conversation a while ago when we talk about handouts and all this kind of thing. Now, to create vote banks, the handout thing started, partner. You know, people would get stuff to vote. All right. We have a leader who are telling the nation that the intention is to make the rich richer so that they can help the poor. Now, when young people in these depressed and impoverished communities would hear statements like that, sometimes you ask yourself, what in the world they expect the young people to do if in a place like Trinidad and Tobago, we hear the kind of monies that are spent via budgets in a partner. I mean, we have
definitely
billions. There was even a talk where a certain bunch of people, a small bunch of people, came out publicly and said, we control things. We run things. And these are the same people who are empowered and given all kind of facilitation to become richer so that they will help the poor. Now, The way how they helping the poor is by these meager wages that can't really get them out of any kind of situation, especially if it's in an area that has the experiences of that kind of life.
Right.
So tell me, is the onus on the leader to make the change that will encourage equity and to an extent equality of his own people? Sometimes when they say we are doing this for the people, I would like to ask them, who are the people they are talking about? In other words, I'll say, sir, point a finger to the people who you are talking about, because in many instances we hear them say, we are doing this for the people. And yet still, you see big societies, big areas, communities, it's expanded, that are crying out for help, that are impoverished, that cannot enjoy even these housing projects and stuff. I live south, and I see people are being evicted because they cannot pay. Sometimes I say to myself too, well, if you wanted it, you would have had to have some sort of method to deal with it when you get it, that you can sustain it and you can pay for it and all of that. I understand all of that. But if on the other hand, the equity and the equality is not of a fair nature, how would NJAC approach as leaders, or to convert the leaders, have a conversation with the leaders to bring about that kind of change? How and when is that going to happen?
I will come to that, but I had not finished making my point a while ago.
Okay, go ahead.
The question of national unity. And I wanted to show you the extent to which the powers that be oftentimes would go to extreme lengths in order to create or solidify divisions in a society. And when they saw the unity, as a matter of fact, I spoke about Archbishop Gordon. I didn't mention that in 1970, Archbishop Anthony Pantin had said he was going to join the demonstration for national unity down to Caroni, at that time down to Couva, that he was going to join that march. But they brought so much pressure was brought to bear on him that the day before it appeared in the Guardian that he has decided to withdraw his and he apologized for changing his decision. And that demonstration is one of the demonstrations that we had that was one of the strongest focal points of concern where the established powers of the society was concerned. So much so that demonstration was on the 12th of March, right? Virtually 1 month after, on the 11th of April, you were having what all of us in Tobago had determined was going to be our largest demonstration. That is the one from Scarborough Car Park to Charlottesville. And it was, in fact, the largest demonstration. And something happened there that shows the extent to which people will go in order to maintain the status quo. Because if anyone could ask me, or even you, right, if that demonstration is not to proceed on that day, right, from Scarborough Car Park to Charlottesville, what would your approach be as the authorities? Obviously, you would stop the demonstration in the car park and inform the organizers this demonstration cannot proceed, although they had no reason to do so. But that is not what happened. They allowed the demonstration on a 27-mile march to travel approximately 16 miles uphill and downhill in the hot sun. And The police were there right through. They are following the demonstration. Everything is peaceful. And they wait until the demonstration was at the top of a place called Bad Rock. Those who may know Tobago, overlooking Kendall. And they swung into action with their sirens and their vans and everything, and they blocked the demonstration and told Brother Granger, as you would say, Brother Macandal Dagger, that the demonstration could go no further. And the demonstrators, because you'd have had about 12 to 15,000 people, and they became very agitated. So much so that even the women were burning their noses with wet cloth because the police had tear gas, right? Because they didn't intend to just walk 16 miles, right? Charlottesville is only 11 miles away, and then had to walk 60 miles back to Scarborough without completing the demonstration. But the most interesting part of the whole thing, right, is that we were hearing that they were talking about sending reinforcements from Trinidad, right? Would you believe that 90% of the police officers they sent were Indian, right? And that when they found they didn't have enough numbers, they got some youngsters, young Indian brothers, and conscripted them, gave them a 2-week training or whatever it may be, and conscripted them as special officers, put them in a uniform, and sent them. Simply because they knew that the demonstration or the demonstrators were going to respond, in a most disturbed and angry manner to being stopped after 16 miles. And they were hoping that there would be a conflict, because at that time, Tobago was not even what it is today. At that time, we used to count 5 Indian families in Tobago. Tobago was almost 100% African. And having Indian police officers coming to Tobago at the top of Bad Rock, a 200-foot drop down to the rocks by the ocean, right? They anticipated that with a conflict taking place there, both police officers as well as civilians were going to go over that cliff, or would have been shot by a police officer or an Indian police officer being pushed over, right? And that would have been the end of any discussion for Indian-African unity. Fortunately, Brother Macandal Dagger, then Geddes Granger, got on the microphone and he directed his words first to the demonstrators. He told them, do not antagonize the police, keep your peace. And then he spoke to the Indian officers. He said, when we marched to Caroni, there was unity, there was peace, there was love, there was brotherhood, there was sisterhood, right? And this demonstration, or this initiative where they have sent you all here to Tobago, because they know Tobago is a total African population, is to create a racial conflict which none of us would be able to repair. And with that, but mind me, the person in charge, the senior superintendent, was an African. Good. But the majority of the officers were Indians. And the Indian officers just began to pull to the side, and then all the officers had to pull to the side and let the demonstration proceed. And that is how we arrived in Charlottesville without a major incident. Had the chief servant not really began to speak and get across to them the message that their presence there was to create a racial conflict, and they would have seen it clearly. Because why bring that large majority of Indian officers to an island that is populated by Africans? Wait until you reach the most dangerous point on the whole march, Bad Rock, to create an incident. But history was not to be written that way on that day. We arrived in Charlottesville safe and sound in a huge demonstration, and everything went peaceful after that. So the point being, the point I wanted to make is the effort that sometimes you don't realize the undercurrents. Now, had that not happened, had the chief servant not spoken like that, right, there could have been a racial conflict that would not have done any good to the initiative for Indian African or racial unity or national unity. Today, right, we would have been torn apart even more than we were back then in the 70s.
Mr. Mohini, my commitment to you when we had our initial discussion pertaining to this is that we're going to be doing a series, meaning that we'll do it again next week for another hour and 45 minutes, where you'll get to develop some of the things that you're speaking about. So I don't want you to leave here, and I don't want the public to believe that we in any way hijack the dialogue and took it on a pathway that suppresses you in taking us through that history. So for the listening public and for the benefit of the public, we are having a continued program next week, an extended program, an extended discussion, where we'll get more into some of the germinal upbringings of the movement back then and some of our history there. But I want to invite you to make a comment. We're into the last 5 minutes, right? If you can lend a comment.
Right.
When we look at you served, and I'm looking at your CV, you served in then it was the Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration in 2012-2013.
Right.
You also served in the Ministry of Art and Multiculturalism. By way of comment, are you of the belief that Pantran-Bego and Tuku, that what they have lent to culture by way of how they've managed the steel band movement, how they've managed the Calypsonians, that in their efforts, that organization has remained an instrument of central government, or an instrument of ministries fueled by central government?
That those institutions?
Right. No, let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
When we look at Pantran-Bego and Tuku, they depend on handouts from central government in order to subsist. And the steel band movement and the steel bands that stand under the umbrella of Pantran-Bego, in the same way that the Calypsonians who stand under the umbrella of Tuku, they have not been able to fully evolve and develop in the way that they could have, in terms of an industry, in terms of being able to create their own wealth where they can develop themselves as single entities that could support itself. Rather, the Pantran-Bego have not been able, as an instrument of central government, to sufficiently evolve and develop and fuel steel bands into being independent, separate entities. The steel bands have been more or less left to do that on their own through sponsorship.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can't make a very informed comment on what happens where that type of development is concerned, because I've never been a member of either of the institutions, nor am I privy to their decisions. However, I know that you are talking there about operations at two levels. You are talking about operation at the level of the institution, whether it is Pantran-Bego or Tuku, at that level, at that organizational level. But you are also talking about organization at the level of the communities, where the steel bands originate, where the Calypsonians may come from, or what have you. So you are talking about two aspects of the development process, because the process can't be one-handed. It has to be, as they say, you need two hands to clap. It has to be a process that could develop the Calypsonians individually. It has to be a process that could develop the steel pan groups individually, the various pan sides, as well as a process for the operational or positive operations of the parent institutions. I believe on both sides there could be more to be desired. But as I indicated, for me to try to comment on, I don't know what their budget is, right? I don't know. I know that they have acquired parliamentary parliamentary legality, if you want to put it that way, or they have been instituted by Parliament as institutions that are granted subventions and assistance, right? So at the functional level, I am not in a position to really give an informed comment.
We leave that for food for thought for the next time. As a closing remark, what we can see and what we perhaps would have you touch on next week. So I'm giving you a heads up. Panchandigo has recently returned to the central government, returned to the state 12 acres of land that was given to them in 1995.
Right.
I would imagine that NJAC's vision would have been that we develop our ownership locally. We take control of our destiny and we make decisions independent of anybody, external body. So the ownership of land was important and significant. I would imagine
Definitely.
Right. So when Panchandigo surrendered 12 acres back to the state, after having it in their possession from 1995 to now, that's a period of almost 30 years, and did nothing. One has to examine that situation as to whether, in the spirit of NJAC's vision, whether Panchandigo has succeeded or failed in developing culture in the manner that it should. But we'll leave that for next week. I want to thank you for your time, for your warmth and your willingness to be here today.
Thank you for having me as well.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that so very much. I have a million questions to ask you, sir.
Okay.
So we look forward to next week's edition. It will be on Wednesday instead.
Yes.
Yes. So I want to thank you for the information shared, and I hope that we can reach a stage where we can bring about a deeper awareness of the struggles that we've been through to be at this state and juncture today.
Right, definitely.
Yes.
And next week we try to be looking more at the history and the question of how the problems that we are facing can be, should be, and will be dealt with.
I hear you.
We definitely will be. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And blessings to the public. To those who are listening, this was Mr. Mbao Moheni sharing with us, the servant president of NJAC. Until next week, Wednesday, we'll be back with him developing along the same theoretical basis that we started in. Thank you so much. Blessings to you, the public, and to David and Mr. Moheni. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
That's it for today's edition of Hard Talk. We had Faeed on today and instead of yesterday being a holiday. So I accommodate him today. So next Wednesday, we invite you to tune in as we continue under the topic, the 1970 Revolution, the Black Power movement, and its benefits of Trinidad and Tobago, or to Trinidad and Tobago. So until next week, join us again for another edition of